So I'm between the lunch break and this presentation, of course. So I hope you still have enough energy to sit through this presentation. But we are going to switch gear a bit in this presentation. I'm Nicoletta Piccolo-Rovazzi, Technology and Sustainability Director for Olympic and Sport Solutions at DOW. And so many of you will be thinking, what does Olympic and Sport Solutions have to do with a chemical company and with climate change? And exactly this question is what I'm going to try to address in my presentation. We have already heard a couple of times today that the world around is changing. We are talking about a new norm. We have heard about some facts and figures. By 2030, we will need 30% more water, we will need 50% more food, and we will need 45% more energy. So practically, by 2030, half of the world population will be living in water-stressed areas. We will need to double agricultural output, and we will need to do that with the same amount of land and with less water. The good news is that at DOW, we think that innovation and our technology, together with collaboration, can create solutions for this. And I think we all in this room are part of being a creator of solutions. So we already have today many solutions that help save energy, for instance in buildings, that help purify water, or that help generate products for consumers that are more resource efficient and energy efficient. Let's now focus, though, on the carbon reality. By 2030, we will need to reduce CO2 emissions by 40%, and by 2050, we will need to reduce it by 70%. Today, the man-made greenhouse gas emissions are at an all-time high, and in order to limit global warming, a commitment was made in Paris in 2015, December 2015, to halt climate change. For the first time, this is a global agreement. 191 countries are part of this agreement. So for the first time, we actually have the mathematical possibility to limit climate change, because 98% of the global emissions are represented by the 191 countries. In order for the Paris Agreement to enter into force, 55 countries representing minimum 55% of the global emissions will need to ratify the agreement. Actually, I think last week the first hurdle, the first milestone was achieved when to date we have 61 countries that have actually ratified the Paris Agreement. They only represent 48% currently of the emissions, but it's expected that before the end of the year we will have the right amount of emissions under this umbrella. So the framework exists, it's a political framework, but how do we really implement this? How do we go about creating solutions? Well, first of all, it needs many different actors in society to work together. We have the governments that have set all the targets and set all the targets and commitments. They have submitted the national determined contributions, but it's business that holds the solutions. And there is a business opportunity in here. That's the good news. The business opportunity is expected to be between $5 and $10 trillion through 2030. But also the consumers are starting to change behavior. The consumers are starting to take sustainability into their decision criteria. And it might surprise you, but just touching base on sport here, that in a survey that was conducted by a research institution, 80% of the international federations quote sustainability as being the #1 priority. So this is really, I think, what is going on in sport reflects what is going on also in the minds of consumers. Now I want to talk again a little bit more about how do we achieve this shift? How do we implement technologies and solutions that are more energy efficient and have a lower carbon footprint? And I have pulled up this very old chart. This was created probably more than 10 years ago. I see some people nodding. I absolutely love this chart. It's what is called a carbon abatement curve. And I just don't understand why people don't look at this chart more, because there are some very interesting things we can see in this carbon abatement curve. You have here the carbon abatement cost on this axis, and here you have the carbon abatement potential. So a bar that is very wide has a very high carbon abatement potential. The cost, a bar that is very low in the negative area here, has a negative carbon abatement cost. That means that the return on the investment is higher than the investment. So these are economically viable solutions. The problem, I believe, that exists is that most of the incentives and the focus in the carbon markets, for instance in the voluntary carbon markets, has been on these solutions that have a positive, well, in this case it's not that positive, but that have a positive carbon abatement cost that are not economically viable. And the assumption was made that these technologies would anyway get adopted. So we didn't need to create any incentives, any focus on these technologies, because they will pay for themselves. And so everybody should really implement them. But this has really not happened. And of course, this abatement curve changes by country and with time, but still we do see a lot of potential in terms of technologies that are economically viable. So why are these technologies not being implemented? The issue is that even if the future state is positive, is more, requires less energy, it is difficult to go over this activation barrier. And the activation barrier comes from many different things. Comes from an initial investment cost, comes, for instance, from a negative perception, a not invented here syndrome, not being comfortable with a new technology or just a new approach, or just maybe having very limited knowledge. So there are different ways of decreasing this activation energy. And for instance, regulation can be one way, a cost on carbon can be another way, but also marketing. It's a lot about marketing. Whenever we want to decrease that activation energy, we need to create an additional value proposition. So for instance, we need to make the climate benefits of our product an integral part of our value proposition. And how we have done that, this is really what I want to talk to you about, using the Olympic Games as an example. We have really used the power of the Olympic brand to market the sustainability benefits of our technologies and drive implementation and adoption of these technologies. I don't know if there is any company here that in their home location or in any other location has a brand recognition of 95%. While the Olympic rings do have this brand recognition. 95% of the world population, no matter where, no matter what age group, ethnicity, recognize that brand. So that is the reason why we want to associate with this brand to drive technology adoption. I need to probably step back a moment to introduce you to our partnership with the Olympic movement. Dow is the official chemistry company of the Olympic movement, representing hence our industry in the world of sports or of the Olympic movement. Our current agreement with the International Olympic Committee goes from 2010 to 2020. But we were involved in the sports well before then. Ever since the 1980s, we have supplied technologies and materials that go into insulating ice venues or into coating different sports surfaces. As a partner of the Olympic movement, we bring our technologies to play, but we also bring our sustainability expertise and sustainability commitment, a commitment that we have reconfirmed in 2015 through our corporate 2025 sustainability goals. And so let's discuss carbon in the context of the Olympic movement. The Olympic Games, from a carbon perspective, can have a very convoluted ownership of the carbon footprint, because there is an organizing committee, there is a host geography, and then there are spectators flying in and out of the games. So it's a very convoluted emission ownership. In addition, they are a one-off event. So they're kind of exceptional, and so don't get accounted for in the carbon budget of a city or a region. Now, ever since, I would say, 2010, every Olympic Games has tried to look at their carbon emissions, to make an inventory of the carbon emissions, and to reduce them as much as possible. But some people have also started to see that the Olympic Games can be a catalyst for change. Yeah? I'm not trying to pretend that they are our everyday reality, but it's about driving change. And I think they can really be used as a catalyst for change. And so that was the vision also of the Rio 2016 Head of Sustainability that set out a strategy that was not only about minimizing the carbon footprint of the Games, but also about leaving a legacy of lower carbon solutions in the host geography. And that's really where DOW came in. So while the organizing committee was building the inventory of their emissions and was trying to reduce them, we implemented a cross-sector program in Brazil and in Latin America to drive more efficient, lower carbon solutions in different projects. The key of that program was, first of all, that we had to construct a framework. We wanted, by and large, to deploy technologies that are economically viable, and that meet, in particular, the needs of an event organizer. And so we actually wrote what we call the Climate Solutions Framework for Events, a framework that outlines the approach, that leverages best practices from the existing carbon markets, and that leads to generating third-party verified CO2 emission reductions. It's key to understand that we do not create tradable financial instruments, so we do not create carbon credits, but we create high-quality CO2 reductions that are verified at an equivalent level in terms of quality to existing carbon credits, but they are not registered as they're not meant to be sold. They're meant to really just advance the adoption of these technologies in the country. And so we did, so our projects went throughout Brazil and Latin America. We did 8 projects in 3 different sectors: in agriculture, industry, and infrastructure. In the agriculture sector, we worked in 2 areas, mainly in the region of Mato Grosso in Brazil. It's one of the key agricultural regions and regions for cattle farming. And our first project was around recovering degraded land. So some of this pasture land had been degraded. And we are recovering this degraded land to, on the one hand, capture carbon in the soil, and on the other hand, support intensification of livestock farming. In the second area of agriculture, we work on implementing variable rate technology. It's an approach that optimizes the use of fertilizer to enhance productivity and reduce the nitrogen oxide that you get from the fertilizer that is, of course, has a high global warming potential. So that's, for instance, in the area of agriculture. And through these 2 projects, we engaged more than 20 farms and 100,000 hectares of land that are working towards generating CO2 emission reductions, third-party verified, as a legacy of the Olympic Games. In the area of industry, we had really a two-pronged approach. One was on getting on the adoption of processes that lead to products with a lower carbon footprint. And that was in the case of the packaging technologies. We introduced a technology, a proprietary technology from Dow that is called microfoaming, that is used in flexible packaging. And we introduced that technology to 4 customers and converted 6 production lines to that technology, hence leading to millions of packages for the consumer with 15% lower carbon footprint. We also had a piece of our portfolio that is in the renewable energy area, where we use renewable energy sources. We use renewable energy sources from sugarcane and from eucalyptus to fuel cogeneration plants. And so for that this can be done at a very big industrial scale in a country like Brazil. Then in the last sector, that was the infrastructure sector, we focused on 2 areas. One is, again, how do we reduce the embedded carbon in products? And the second one is, how do we get the value chain to start taking energy efficiency into consideration when they make their decisions? So our first project was about really working with the entire value chain. It engaged probably about 600 to 700 people in the value chain in Brazil and also in Argentina to talk about energy efficiency and to start really changing the conversation around energy efficiency and making that part of the decision making. In that project, actually, the interesting thing was also that we brought our customers to the table. We brought different competitors to the table to all join in this dialogue. And we also worked with 2 customers in Argentina and in Mexico to convert their formulation to a lower global warming potential blowing agent, reducing significantly the carbon footprint embedded in the product. Now, these customers did this really well in advance of regulation, and they took additional risks and also costs to a certain extent to do that in order to differentiate in the marketplace. So as I said, key to this program was that we created a framework that really laid down all the rules that we would follow in order to execute this approach, and that it went across different sectors. So it's a very broad program with the 8 projects. And the way we identified these 3 different sectors was that we actually took the national determined contributions from a country like Brazil and looked at what are their priorities, what are the areas of focus, and then we looked at what kind of technologies do we have that address some of these areas of focus. And that's how we identified the projects. Of course, it was very important for us to have a very significant presence in Brazil. We were able to bring a lot of our customers to the table and really change the conversation with the customers, really starting to help them to understand this space too and help them get prepared for, I would say, what a future reality looks like for all of us. So to date, all of the projects have been evaluated by an external company. Our third-party validator is ERM, Environmental Resource Management. They are a very well-recognized consulting company in this area, and they have looked at all the project implementation documents, the evidence that we could produce on what we had done, and they estimate, based on this evidence, that these projects are going to deliver 2.2 million tons of CO2 emissions throughout the realization period. We had agreed with the organizing committee of the Olympic Games that we would have a 10-year realization period, and so by 2026, 2.2 million tons will be generated from these projects. To date, we have already verified 100,000 tons that have already been delivered through these projects. So overall, there were, this is a journey. There is a lot more that needs to happen, and I'm not pretending that a program such as this for the Olympic Games is really changing the reality that we all live in. But it is a demonstration of how you can accelerate adoption of technologies that are by and large economically viable, but that have all a perceived or real barrier to adoption. Key to this was, as I already said, the framework that we created. On the other hand, the fact that we had a broad portfolio of technologies and solutions, and then the cross-sector collaboration. I think this was really the most powerful, to see the number of people that we could use this program to convene and use also the focus of the Olympic Games to create an urgency and a very ambitious target also. So overall, we think that Olympic Games have generate a lot of winning athletes, but I do think they also can generate winning partnerships, and we do believe that this partnership with Rio 2016 was a real winning one, because we integrated the capabilities, the unique capabilities of skill of every one of the actors to really maximize the result. So we used our technology partners and customers as well as experts that were on the ground and understood the reality in Brazil. We brought the overall program management as DOW and our technologies to play, and we used the Olympic brand and the exposure that we could give to this brand to our customers to really engage everybody. So while the athletes in Rio have all left already, our technologies are still doing their job and will continue to do so, and we will continue to verify the results of this program, because it's not just relevant for the Games, but it has relevance well beyond the Games. Thank you.
Many thanks, Nicoletta. We have short time before the lunch to have a question, some question from the audience.
Stefan Schnippering from Albemarle here from Frankfurt. Are you going to have the same program also 2020 in a well-developed country like Japan?
Well, okay, so we had a similar program in Sochi, actually. We were also the official carbon partner of Sochi, and that was actually the first time that we did a kind of a pilot. This, DOW does not do this normally, but we saw an opportunity to do this, so we have already done it in Sochi. I would tell you that Brazil was extremely challenging. Brazil is a very low carbon economy, actually. The economic output per dollar in Brazil is 4 times less carbon intense than in Russia. And so to do this program in Brazil was very, very challenging. But yes, I agree. In developed economies, it's in general more challenging. But we're looking at this. And so the next 3 Olympic Games are going to be in Asia. First in Pyeongchang, the Winter Olympic Games, then in Tokyo, and then in Beijing, actually, Winter Olympic Games. So there will be a focus on Asia to see what we can do there. But we don't just do, this was an example that I brought of how we engage in the Olympics. We also provide a lot of technologies and solutions in all the infrastructure construction, in the field of play, for things like hockey pitches and so on. Technologies from DOW go in there too.
One more question.
Pierre Dournal, Solvay. In the example you've shown for the application in Rio, are there already known technology, or did you have an R&D program in preparation to this event?
By and large, there were known technologies, but that faced, a very key criteria for us to claim that these technologies or these climate benefits that we produce with the technologies are additional, is that they face really demonstrable barriers. Yeah? I'll give you one example. For instance, the microfoaming technology. We had tried to bring that to the market for 2 years, and we were not very successful. There was an issue with that you typically go with a new technology to one customer. But then if the brand owner only has one supplier, he will not accept only one supplier. So you need to have a kind of a push that includes more than one customer. And that's what we did with this. We really set up this structure in such a way that we would convert a number of different customers, and they received, they had to put some investment in place, but they also received some benefits in terms of the communication benefits that we could offer them to promote their technologies and their leadership. So it's by and large it's existing technologies, but that are not widely distributed.
One more? Yes, please. No, here. Here. Okay.
Yeah. So excellent presentation. And while these examples are very good examples of opportunities where you can showcase your technology, how do you broad base the adoption of these technologies outside of Brazil now?
Yeah, so overall, it needs to be always linked to what are the priorities in different geographies. Yeah? So for Brazil, agriculture was a key. I remember when we moved from Russia, let's say, to Brazil, the first thing we said is, okay, we need to do something in agriculture. We're fortunately a big agriculture business. But whatever we do, this is reducing CO2 emissions is a priority for 191 countries. So I would encourage you, if you are interested in this space, first thing to look at is the national determined contributions and see where do you have technologies that, if applied more broadly, address any of these. And as I say, I really do think that these carbon abatement curves are intriguing, because there are so many technologies that have not been tapped into, even though they are economically viable. So I think that's really the first advice I would give. Understand the national determined contribution, understand where you have technologies. And in most cases, it was not just the Dow ingredient that would do the job. It was really working with consultants, with customers, with their customers to apply a new approach.
Thank you. We have just last question, please.
Yeah, it's Richard Northcote from Covestro. Firstly, congratulations. I think it's fantastic. I think what you've done for this industry to be associated with the Olympic Games was a great step, I think. And for Dow to take that step was brilliant. And that's what my question is. But the other thing I'd like to congratulate you on is really highlighting the low carbon economy, because I don't think we do enough of that. I think everybody is fixated on the circular economy, and we're ignoring the low carbon economy. So you've raised two great issues in that presentation. My question is actually quite easy. How on earth do you convince a board to do something like that?
Okay, so the board convincing other people did for us. I have to say, what we got is, when we got this Olympic partnership in 2010, we got a big goal. We have to deliver $1 billion of additional value between 2010 and 2020. And so we were charged with the role how to do this. And that's not super easy. And in addition, you want to do stuff that your businesses are not doing. Because if I just do what a business would be doing anyway, I have not added anything. And so that is really how this whole program came into play. Because we were looking at things that were out there and were in need of event organizers, but that our business wasn't doing. And so we started to provide carbon mitigation services, which is quite unusual. One thing I want to say before I have to close here, I think, is that the framework that we have created is available to all of you. It's not just relevant for events. I think you will find some interesting information in there. You can download it from our website. And also, there is a carbon report that outlines all of the projects that we have done in Brazil in a lot more detail. and why they are beyond business as usual in their geography.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for your very great presentation.